mention, this was for the Island Lake subdivision. There was a tax exempt series and a taxable. And the reason for it was what stuff it paid for. So the tax exempt bond issue is really what we're dealing with here, which paid for a lot of the public infrastructure, the streets, the sewers, the storm sewers, etc. The taxable bond issue paid for some of the other stuff that wasn't all public improvements, so some of the site improvements and things on the property. The taxable bonds were refinanced, and I think those are now done. So we're just dealing with the tax exempt series that was issued in 2005. We refinanced it in 2015, and now we have a chance to do it again. I don't have the exact numbers on what the original amount was, but the way the bonds were structured was they were structured as a 30-year deal with roughly annual level debt service payments. So yes, the city has been paying down on the bonds since 2005, but just like your home mortgage, in those first several years, it's more interest than principal, and as you get closer to the end, it ends up being more principal. So I don't know the exact number of the original deal. I want to say it was somewhere around $20 to $25 million. Jason might have a better number for me, or Sean's while I'm stalling. But so a significant amount has been paid down, and essentially this is essentially refinancing what's remaining.
And so I don't know how this works. So just like if you refinance your home or whatever, there are closing costs or so what are those?
Yeah, good question. So this is actually very similar to refinancing your mortgage with one little distinction. So the idea is that interest rates today are lower than they were in 2015. And so just like when you go refinance your mortgage, we're essentially going to go to a new bond purchasers to borrow the money to pay off the old loan. So we're going to trade in the higher debt for lower interest rate debt. The difference, though, is that when you go refinance your mortgage, you do it all the same day. You go get the new mortgage, and they send the money to your old mortgage company, and it's gone. Here, we have a little bit of a lag, because we can't pay off the old bondholders. We have to give them 30 days notice. So essentially, we're going to go borrow the money, and then we tell the bondholders we're going to pay them off in 30 to 90 days, depending on what that time period is. So, but it works effectively the same. There are closing costs and issuance costs, and that includes paying the underwriter to buy the bonds. That would be sort of like points on a mortgage, legal fees, financial fees, rating agency fees, and then the fees for buying the securities for that time period. Those numbers fluctuate depending on what's issued. If we did all the bonds, it ended up, well, I guess it was 5.2 million. It ends up 120,000, Sean?
It'll depend again on the market with bond insurance costs, things like that, but anywhere probably from $130,000 to $150,000 in insurance costs. But again, these savings figures are net of those costs. So.
Right, yeah. So when they talk about the savings, that's after taking into account the payment of the issuance costs as part of the transaction.
And the original issue in 2005 was just over 11 million, so 11.2.
That was just a tax.
Correct. Yep. And the other one was 3 million for the.
Okay, so 15 million for the two deals together back in 2005.
Okay, so in 20 years, we paid down half. Oh,
Yeah, approximately. Yeah.
and there's still, so we're expecting to pay down the rest of this in 10 years?
Yes.
Okay. And then, so when we did it in, was it 2021, we tried and it didn't work out. Don't you lock in the rate? Like, you know, if I say yes, don't I get to lock in my rate when I say yes? I mean, why did we lose that opportunity? What happened there? How did that happen?
Sure. Two things happened. First of all, we never got to the point to lock in the rate. So we did all the prep work. We came to the city council, the board, got all the documents finalized, actually had mailed the offering document, and we were getting ready to price, and interest rates in February of 2021 started to go up. So we never got to that point to where we had an agreement and a rate was locked in. So we were probably a couple weeks shy of that happening. And the other thing that happened, which just to complicate it,
Hoping you would.
we have a favorable change in the tax law that allows us to make this work better now, and that is this. Back in 2017, when they changed the tax law, one of the things that they took away during those tax cuts was the ability of governmental units to refinance certain bonds too far before the call date. So most bonds, and why you see this happen every 10 years, can be called about 10 years after they're issued. So if you do a 30-year deal, you can call it in 10 years. And that's why the '05 bonds were refinanced in 15 in the first call. The 15 bonds are not callable until this year, 2024. But, and the law changed to say that you can't do the refinancing more than 90 days before the call date on a tax-exempt basis. So back in 2021, interest rates were so low that we were looking at doing that transaction on a taxable basis, and we would still save money. But then the rates started to go up. So it's not until this year that we can now go and refinance these bonds on a tax-exempt basis. And the difference is that tax-exempt rates, because you are a governmental unit and can do certain kinds of deals tax-exempt, generally that means that's about 1 to 2% lower than taxable rates. So that's why suddenly the savings look a lot better now, but wouldn't have looked as good, say, a year ago. So there's sort of a market timing. But your basic question was, why didn't we have the rate locked in? Because we didn't get to that point in the process where we could lock in the rate. And normally, once we lock in the rate, we close within a matter of a few weeks, so we were shy of that date.
Karen? Just a few more. Thank you for letting us know all this. It's very interesting. Okay, so how much was there a lot of cost for that 2021?
No,
Not happening, no
We didn't
cost
pay
to the
anything.
city?
we didn't pay anything. So, and that's another part of this, because the transaction did not close, nobody charged any costs related to that.
Okay, great. And then, just said, come back to me
Sure.
in a second. I think for a minute.
I know Jason and I spoke. Can you explain the repayment of these bonds and where that money comes from? Because I think that as we talk to general fund, it's not, as of right now, I think those payments are being made by council and EDA.
Yes, so, with the liability for these bonds, we talked about during the budget meetings is that, the annual payment before refinancing or whatever happens with this item was approximately about just shy of $1 million a year. Well, the tax increment revenue from that site was not enough to pay those debt payments. So what had to happen is that a couple other entities had to chip in money to pay as well too. The DDA had to chip in money because the district is in a DDA district as well as the brownfield. So the DDA contributes money to the bond payments. And then after that, the water and sewer contributes a percentage to the bond payments because of the infrastructure that was put in. And then the remaining balance was paid for by the general fund. As I mentioned during the budget meeting, since the values of that property have increased, the tax increment revenues has also increased to help, pay more of those bonds. So the general fund portion is zero, and I believe the general fund stopped paying a couple years ago, I believe, is when they stopped paying on the debt. And then this year, I believe, the majority of the DDA revenue is also not being paid for by the debt anymore. So now you just have the actual tax revenue, and then you have the water and sewer portion, and I think a small sliver of the DDA portion. So again, any savings that we can get on these bonds within the parameters is a good thing for those funds who are, paying that debt.
Any other members or representatives? Councilman Brendan? Councilman Brendan?
Okay, so if the interest rate goes down in the time before this happens, do we get to get the cheaper interest rate, or is it what it is right now today? Okay, I mean, when you go to do it. You know what I mean? We're penalizing.
Yeah, the answer is, we don't get to lock in an interest rate until the bonds are offered for sale, and that's expected to be sometime in late May or early June. So this is all still a projection based on where the market is with a little bit of cushion. Sean, can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, no, we've provided updates over time. These numbers have certainly changed and will continue to change, but as of